Annals of Arithmancy, Chapter 23, The Science of Magic. Disclaimer. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Thus speaks J.K. Rowling, or maybe Bob Dylan. 26th of December, 2014. Harry Potter looked up from the bar as his cousin sat down beside him. "Thanks for coming, Big D," he said. Dudley Dursley rolled his eyes. "It's just Dudley, Harry. You know that." "I could always go with Dinky Diddydums," he said with a grin. Dudley groaned and rubbed his forehead. "That stopped being funny when it stopped annoying you, and it shouldn't have even taken that long." He lowered his voice and added, "Having that wife of yours in your head is a bad influence on you." And wasn't that the weirdest thing ever to him? Dudley loved his own wife, but he couldn't imagine dealing with that all the time. Harry snorted. "Ginny says flattery will get you nowhere." He ordered Dudley a drink, then showed him the tip of his wand and cast a muffliato around them. It was to Dudley's credit that he no longer flinched around magic. Harry thought he'd really improved a lot over the years. He was in better shape than his father had been at his age, too. Still a heavyweight, but also still somewhat muscular. Harry privately thought Dudley would make a good bouncer, but Vernon had helped him get his foot in the door of the business world, though he now worked nowhere near Grunnings. They briefly caught up on family. They didn't get together often. Harry told Duddle about James's exploits at Hogwarts, and Dudley told how his own kids were doing. If they were honest, neither of them really cared much beyond common courtesy. Neither of their children had met their father's mysterious cousin, and they cared even less about the happenings in each other's worlds, but they still tried to talk once a year. Only, this year was more complicated than most. "Listen, I didn't want to worry you about this until it was for sure, but we've been working the past 2 years on something," Harry said. Dudley furrowed his brow. "Something with magic?" he said. "What's that got to do with me?" "Well, here's the thing. You know how things are in the Muggle world today? Better than I do, probably. Smartphones, satellites, cameras everywhere." "Yeah." "All the ways we have to hide magic? They're not going to work for much longer. Not with computers and drones and robots recording everything. So, the International Confederation of Wizards took a vote last spring, and we're going to repeal the Statute of Secrecy." Dudley's beer slopped all over his hand as he nearly dropped it. He made a funny choking sound, and set it back on the bar. "Are you bloody serious, Harry?" he squeaked. "Yeah, sorry. Hermione did the maths. There's simply no way we can keep hiding from Muggles long term. We're going to be found out." "Christ!" Dudley muttered, pressing his fists against the sides of his head. "That's going to be a mess. Everyone knowing about magic? Oh God, I don't even know." "I know how you feel, Dudley," Harry said. "Most of us feel that way too, believe it or not." I think I might build a bunker in the woods," he decided. "Is this happening right away?" "Oh, hell no. This'll take years to pull off. We're making the announcement on the 3rd of May, 2021. I just thought you had the right to know now." Dudley seemed to deflate as he sagged with relief. 2021. At least I have time to prepare. Still, I think the shock might finally finish off Dad." Harry refrained from saying what he thought about that. "Is it going to be all at once? Or are you doing stuff before then? Or what?" "Some. Probably not anything you'll notice, but Hermione's been telling just about any Muggle she thinks needs to be involved in the transition. And we're thinking about telling families with Muggle-born kids about magic as soon as we find them so that they can get acclimated. We can identify them with the Hogwarts registry from about age 5. We probably will. I mean, we did that during the war to protect them, but that was technically illegal." Dudley suddenly grew very nervous and began stammering. My kids aren't... I mean, I wouldn't have a problem, but if they were..." Harry chuckled. "No, Dudley, your kids aren't magical, as far as we can tell. You don't need to worry," he said. I don't want you to think I'm..." Dudley said quickly before getting stuck again. Racist? Harry said, and Dudley flinched and nodded awkwardly. No, you're fine. Knowing how you were brought up, if we're being honest looking back, your parents screwed you up as much as they did me. His cousin frowned. I still love them and all, but yeah, they kinda did. After that Demented attack. Dementor, Harry said automatically. I took a look at myself and started to realize what an utter bastard I was. I had to unlearn most of what they taught me before Michelle would even look at me. I don't know why it didn't do more to Mum and Dad. Harry shrugged uncomfortably. Some people react to trauma like that by sinking deep into themselves. That you made it as far as you have is kind of a miracle. Yeah, I know. Thanks for telling me, Harry. No problem, Dudley. 10th of April, 2015. The Chalice of Helga Hufflepuff was rumored to have healing powers. Not like the Holy Grail or the Elixir of Life, but better than most healing that was available in her day. Others said it was supposed to turn water into wine. Others that it would lift curses. Still others said it was supposed to do all of those things, and more. The Chalice was the last and most mysterious of the four Founders' artifacts at Hogwarts. Hermione wasn't expecting that to be the case. Hardly anyone was. But the Locket of Salazar Slytherin had been solved 2 years ago, when Slytherin House got together and decided to bring a Parselmouth up from India to speak to it in Parseltongue. With the Horcrux removed, the original spells reasserted themselves. They were custom spells, so it took trial and error to determine what they actually did, but they teased them out. The first set of spells were detection spells that could be activated by any Parselmouth and, once activated, would work for anyone wearing the locket, Parselmouth or not. They would detect poisons, traps, and hidden weapons that were set before the user, even those that were normally undetectable. A very Slytherin thing to do, they all thought. The second set of spells required a code that would presumably have been known only to Slytherin's descendants. It was only thanks to their escapade in the Chamber of Secrets that Harry knew the code. Translated to English, "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four." Which wasn't much of a code, but it was the 11th century. This code caused the locket to play a Parseltongue message apparently recorded by Slytherin himself, telling the wearer about the Chamber of Secrets and how to get in. Upon entering the chamber, they found that it also played a message ordering the basilisk not to harm the wearer, and it further directed the wearer to a hidden compartment wherein several ancient scrolls of Slytherin's notes were stored. Undoubtedly the most valuable historical find of the four artifacts. As for the Chalice, however, the Hogwarts staff, with Hermione advising, groped towards an answer for a long time until they hit on calling an alchemist. Hufflepuff wasn't known for elemental alchemy, but she was known for healing, and healing included spagyric, alchemical medicine. Upon new analysis, the cup proved to be a powerful alchemical implement that could transmute many kinds of liquids, especially those related to life and healing. It didn't just conjure water, but mineral-fortified water. It could remake hydration salt water for dysentery long before the principles of treating dysentery were understood. It could transmute milk for babies, spirits for disinfection, oil, wine, vinegar, quinine, willow bark infusion, and, to cap it off, a truly magical fortifying elixir that promoted general wellness and would cure minor ailments. Longer lasting than Wiggenweld potion, more well-rounded than Girding potion. It was impressive. But even so, it was pretty hopeless to use the Chalice for general healing. It couldn't produce enough elixir for widespread use, and specific cures were better for almost any ailment one might have. But there were a small number of people with unusual problems for whom it might be a godsend. Thus, Professor Hookham had allowed Hermione to borrow the artifact and take it to someone who needed it. She entered the manor, welcomed in by the house elf, and she called out, "Hello, Astoria!" "Hi, Hermione." Astoria Greengrass sat on a lounge chair in the drawing room reading the Prophet. She wasn't wearing her oxygen cannula. She didn't need it all the time so far, but she looked pale and thin, as always, the blood curse slowly taking its toll. "How are you feeling?" Hermione asked. "About the same," Astoria said. "What's up?" I brought a new treatment I thought you should try. Did you hear we finally figured out what Hufflepuff's cup does?" Yeah, I think I heard something about that." Hermione began explaining what the cup did and how it might be able to help her. As she did, Daphne and her husband joined them and listened with interest. Life hadn't been kind to Astoria. First, the blood curse, striking her young with progressive terminal anemia, all because some wizard had had a quarrel with her great-grandmother. Then the war, then a string of failed relationships, one of whom had been a rehabilitated, and underage during the war, Death Eater, only to go off and join Barty Crouch in his fool's errand. Finally, as her health declined, she stopped trying. Then she moved in with her sister and brother-in-law for support. Astoria would say she wasn't sure she'd be alive now without Hermione's help. She remembered that night when Dumbledore's army was discovered and they'd fled the castle. That was the first time she'd ever considered Muggle options. More recently, Hermione had helped rig up an oxygen concentrator that could run in a magical household, and it allowed her to live much closer to a normal life for a while, though the curse was still working. "It can do a lot of things okay, but it seems tailor-made to help with a chronic, curse-induced illness like yours," Hermione finished explaining. Astoria looked very interested, although Daphne was a little more reserved. "And Tori will have unrestricted use of this thing?" Daphne asked. "Such a valuable and useful artifact?" "We don't know exactly what the elixir will do," Hermione replied. "How much good it will do, how often she'll need it, or if it needs to be drunk fresh or directly from the cup. We'll have to test it to figure that out. But if the limitations are reasonable, I'll make sure she gets full treatment." Astoria smiled. "Thanks, Hermione. Let's go ahead and try it out." Once they figured it out, it was pretty simple to make the elixir, so they gave some to her right away. The effect was immediate. She jumped up from her seat and said, "Oh, Merlin's beard! I haven't felt this good in ages!" Hermione wasn't sure at first. She still looked like a stiff wind would blow her over, but it was a marked improvement. When she hugged her in thanks, Hermione could feel her improved strength. It looked like this would be an effective treatment after all. "It's no trouble, Astoria," she replied. "I'm glad it works. And I also have something else for you to see." She held up a folder with a stack of magazine and newspaper articles in it. They all seemed to be of a Muggle scientific bent, and Astoria and her family looked over them in confusion. "What is this?" Daphne asked. "This is something called CRISPR-Cas9. It's a new invention that allows fast and efficient gene editing. One that looks to be usable for humans." Daphne's eyebrows shot up. "You mean all that stuff you kept going on about heritability? That's true? Muggles can really control how things are inherited?" "I've told you Muggles have been dabbling in this for years," Hermione said. "But this is the breakthrough that could really make it feasible. They're already talking about using it to cure genetic diseases. Basically, there's a relatively simple method to change a section of DNA that makes a person's body not work properly." At that, Astoria cut in. "This looks really brilliant, Hermione, but this is all still assuming my blood curse is genetic." "Yes, it is," she conceded. "But I still think that's the most logical way for a curse to work its way into the bloodline, especially being able to skip generations, although those genetics are more complicated, just like magic itself." "You don't know if the magic gene is real either," Astoria said. "It would be nice for me, but I don't think magic likes to be pinned down and defined like that. Not to mention that meddling with the fundamental nature of the self like this is breaking Waffling's first law. This is dangerous magic." Hermione shook her head. "Astoria, I've made a career out of bending Waffling's first law. I know that kind of dangerous magic. And besides, genes aren't the fundamental nature of the self anyway. Genes are like a blueprint for a library. It's what's in the books that's important. Maybe finding a magic gene or blood curse in there won't pan out, but I think it has a pretty good chance. In fact, I'm going to go to Berlin soon to talk to Emmanuelle Charpentier. She's one of the Muggle scientists leading the CRISPR-Cas9 research. I'll tell her about magic and ask her about your case, if you're willing."
Okay, I get it, Hermione. And yes, sure, it can't hurt. It would be great if you did find a cure. Would it happen soon? No, this kind of research takes a long time, and we don't even know where to look yet. But once the Statute of Secrecy is repealed, we'll be able to help it along.
Astoria's face fell.
That's 6 years from now, she said slowly. My 5-year prognosis isn't very good.
Hermione sighed.
The elixir should help, and the oxygen, and maybe you could start seeing Muggle doctors. With no magic and a much larger population, they've invented a lot of techniques that healers have never needed. They might have more for you.
She thought about this for a minute. No matter what Hermione said, witches and wizards were always going to have a bias against Muggle doctors.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that, she said. Thank you again.
Hermione hoped her friend would be okay. It was becoming more difficult than she'd first hoped to keep her going long enough to benefit from future gene therapies, but she was still optimistic. She kept pondering the new discovery as she left. What Hermione hadn't mentioned to Astoria, but which she could probably figure out, was that this had far greater implications than her illness. If magic were really genetic, then it might be possible to copy it over to a Muggle, and that could radically change the upcoming transition process. Although she didn't know what it would do to the magical ecosystem on a large scale. Come to think of it, she'd never even investigated the effects of Muggle to magical blood transfusions. It might be worth looking into, both for Astoria's sake and to document the general effects. 5th of September, 2015. Hermione was put in mind of some unpleasant memories as she walked up to the Muggle house outside Manchester. The last time she'd done something like this, many years ago, they were fleeing from Death Eaters, and some good people had died. This would no doubt go much better than that, but it was still nerve-wracking trying to introduce Muggles to phenomena that only appeared in films and storybooks. Freya Murphy. She was the nearest Muggle-born to Doncaster who would be going to Hogwarts with Emmy in 4 years' time. When did Freya become a common name, she wondered? Well, she'd certainly fit in with the magical world. It seemed an ideal time to find Emmy a new friend now that many of her older cousins had gone off to Hogwarts this week. Bill, Lee, and Molly were all starting this year, and meanwhile Marcus, Sasha, and Nadia had returned for their final year. Hawkhouse Green was still growing. There were now 3 magical families in the neighborhood, with a 4th thinking about moving in, but Russell Whitby was still the only magical child Emmy's age. And since the Ministry had unofficially cleared reaching out to younger Muggleborns, it was high time they got to it. She wondered idly whether it was going to be time to tell their Muggle neighbors about magic. It was unfortunate that the Hogwarts register only gave the child's name and address, but this time Hermione was able to consult a phone book, once she found one, so she knew that the house was occupied by a Danny and Naomi Murphy. She had debated how to introduce herself, since she had the opportunity to plan it out this time. She could guess that it would be much easier if Freya's parents had seen her doing accidental magic, but that wasn't certain. The fact that she was in the registry proved that she had done some, but that didn't guarantee her parents knew about it. In the end, though, she decided to throw caution to the wind. She went up and knocked on the door, and a man opened it.
"Are you Danny Murphy?" she asked.
"Yes," he nodded.
"Pleasure. My name is Hermione Granger, and this may sound completely mental, but I know about your daughter's special abilities, and I want to help."
The look on his face was priceless. 25th of June, 2016. Marcus Aurelius Vector stepped off the Hogwarts Express for the last time and took a deep breath. He was done with school, though not with his education. There had been some serious ups and downs for him at Hogwarts over the years. All in all, he'd enjoyed it, but he was ready to move on.
"Hi, Mum. Hi, Aunt Hermione,"
he greeted his family.
"Hello, Marcus," Aunt Hermione said. "All done with school. How does it feel?"
"It's nice," he said. "I can definitely do without exams every term." His mum hugged him and kissed him on the cheek.
"I'm so proud of you, Marcus," she said. "You've grown up so much. And top marks, of course, especially in Arithmancy. Well, I had to work hard to be Aunt Hermione's apprentice, didn't I? Aunt Hermione chuckled. You really didn't need to worry about that, she said. You know, in the old days it was traditional to always apprentice your mentor's children. If you had the aptitude, I would have been happy to take you on regardless. Thanks, Aunt Hermione, he said. So, what's the big Arithmancy project these days? Well, there are a few active areas of research, but personally I think it's past time to lay some more groundwork for magical computers. I've dabbled with it over the years, but never seriously since I was in school myself. They walked through the barrier into the Muggle world, being careful as always to make sure no cameras were newly placed in an inopportune spot. It wouldn't do any good to reveal themselves early. Emmy and Robin are with George, but they're excited to meet you, Aunt Hermione was saying, but he was only half listening. The Muggle world seemed different this year. Angrier, at least some of them. Some of the Muggles were quietly brooding, but others were having animated debates, and he caught a few words like referendum and Brexit. Hang on, did I miss something? He said. What are they all talking about? The referendum on Thursday, Aunt Hermione grumbled. It's about all anyone's talking about this weekend. Marcus did a double take. Wait a minute, you mean leave one? That's what we said. It was quite the shock. I would have written you, but you were coming home today anyway, so... Bloody hell! Will this cause trouble, leaving the EU and stuff? Not for us, Marcus, Mum assured him. It'll be a bit more inconvenient traveling in Europe, I suppose, but our economy isn't dependent enough on the Muggle economy for it to make a difference. What about the repeal of the Statute of Secrecy? Will it be a problem for that? No, the repeal won't matter whether Britain is in the EU or not. Aunt Hermione wasn't quite as sanguine, though. Getting the Muggles to accept an independent government and economy within their borders will be far more difficult, and vice versa a bit. The goblins are already complaining about the possibility that Muggles will go cashless. It would throw off their entire currency exchange. Marcus shook his head. Can't ever be easy, can it? 9th of November, 2016. Hermione woke the morning after the American Muggle election to a parliament of owls delivering frantic letters from the Repeal Committee. She found out before she even saw a newspaper what had happened. Donald Trump had won. She hurried to the study to check the online news sites to find out the details. Trump had won, narrowly, and without a popular vote majority, thanks to the arcane system they used over there. He'd apparently pulled off an upset by turning out an unexpected number of voters in several economically depressed Midwestern states, or something like that. There was nothing for it. She'd have to jump back in. She got dressed, kissed George goodbye, and met Percy at the ministry. Well, this is a right mess, Percy said, holding up a newspaper. How bad is it? Hermione asked. Mac USA's screaming bloody murder, he said. They're talking like they're afraid to even tell Trump about magic, even though they'll have to before he takes office. I can imagine he wouldn't take another president operating on American soil very well, Hermione offered. That's part of it, I suppose, but it's not even about Trump for them, really. They're saying he's a rallying point for the kind of, quote, radical conservatism that will start up the witch hunts again. They're worried if he's still president when we do the repeal, he'll condemn wizards on camera or be influenced to condemn us, and it'll cause a lot more trouble, especially with the way he runs his mouth. Hermione had to admit that, in part. She could very much see Trump bad-mouthing the magical world without thinking about it and stirring up trouble. And he probably had more ability to do that than anyone else, at least in the Western world. But still, what could they do? So they want to delay till 2025? She asked. Some of them, it looks like. She shook her head. We're already getting sloppy now. People aren't trying as hard to keep the statute. I don't know if we can manage another 4 years now that we've committed to repeal. Besides, what are the odds he wins a second term at all? Percy gave her a scathing look. That's what they said about this election, and about Brexit before that. I don't think even they can make that call. I was talking to the Muggle Liaison office just now, and they say Muggle election polls simply aren't reliable anymore. Yes, I've heard that on the Muggle news. but I don't think there's anything we can do but face it head on. I'd appreciate it if you could tell them that, Hermione. Mac USA's getting everyone riled up. The ICW's called an emergency meeting. Hermione sighed. It was absurd in a way. A few days ago, her biggest worry was trying to imitate the magic in Doctor Strange for her nieces and nephews, which hadn't borne much fruit. Now she was getting dragged back into international politics again. You know, I sold Donald Trump a necklace and some cufflinks once, she tried to say lightheartedly. Really? Yes, I was in school at the time. Well, in tutoring anyway. He seemed a little eccentric, but I never expected this. 31st of July, 2017. Luckily, things settled down over a few days, and they didn't change the repeal date. It was proceeding smoothly again, even if the Americans were a little antsier about their preparations. Life for the extended Weasley clan went on normally, and before they knew it, another year at Hogwarts had passed, and then some. Now, the biggest worry was North Korea, not the United States. The ICW had already put some well-worded agents in there to make sure Kim Jong-un didn't fly off the handle when magic was revealed, or before, but even that had started to calm down. So I saw this online thing, Hermione told Harry at his party. I don't think there's a proper word for it. It's a sci-fi story, I guess. Danny Murphy sent me a link since he knows I like science fiction. It's called 17776. It's a story about a surreal future where everyone plays absurd versions of American football. It's not my usual fare, but it got me thinking. There's Kakadu and Quadrangle now. Have you ever thought about designing a broom game on the really big scale once the statute is repealed? Harry tilted his head, looking thoughtful. He probably never would have considered it when they were younger, but with the innovations of the past few years, it was an interesting idea. How big are we talking about? He said. Like the entire U.S. state of Nebraska big. Harry's eyebrows disappeared under his hair. That's ridiculous, he blurted. That's not a game. You'd need tracking charms just to find the balls. Hermione shrugged. It was just a thought. I can send you the link if you want. They had a lot of other weird variations. The Potters had taken longer to get internet access, but once there was serious talk about repealing the statute, they'd gone ahead with it. Sure, why not? It should be good for a laugh anyway. All right, and I did some tests on your cloak, too. She had finally convinced Harry to loan her his invisibility cloak for study. He'd always hesitated, citing what had happened when his father had loaned it to Dumbledore, but he'd finally given her a chance. Oh, what did you find? He said. Harry, I can say conclusively that there's something very weird about your invisibility cloak. Harry cocked an eyebrow at her. Like we haven't known that for the past 20 years? Honestly, Harry, my first thought was to study a normal invisibility cloak to find out why its magic fades, and what's different about yours. But that got complicated. For starters, your cloak isn't Demiguise's fur. What? It's not the same stuff. It's very similar, but your cloak is noticeably lighter and smoother than a normal one. I put them under a microscope, and yours has smaller fibers. I thought it might be sea silk, an especially fine silk that comes from a kind of oyster, but I called Luna to take a look, and she insisted it was thestral hair, which I'm almost certain it's not, since they hardly have any hair on them. But she had another theory, and that one's eerily plausible. Harry, thoroughly confused by now, asked, What is it? Luna believes that your cloak is the invisibility cloak of Ignatius Perivel. Who? As far as we can tell, which isn't much to be honest, Ignatius Peverell was a powerful 13th century artificer, and maybe an alchemist. The records aren't clear on what century he was born in. But he also had two brothers named Antioch and Cadmus, and they're believed by many, Luna included, to be the inspiration for Beedle's tale of the three brothers. The Deathly Hallows, Harry said, thinking of the magical fairy tales he used to read his children at night. You think the Deathly Hallows are real, and that my cloak is one of them? I don't think they were created by death, no, but I do believe that there could be powerful ancient artifacts that inspired fantastic stories like that one. There's a lot of old magic out there that we don't understand. Mind, I didn't put much stock in it myself until I looked up the Peverell family. You see, what is certain is that Ignotus Peverell had a granddaughter, Eulanthe, and Eulanthe Peverell married one Hardwin Potterer, the second of the Potter line."
Harry's eyes grew very wide. "Then it really could be?"
"Yes, if there was a cloak that could last forever made by Ignotus Peverell, then it most likely would have been passed down the male Potter line until it eventually came to you."
"Bloody hell, and I never would have known."
"It's possible your father didn't know, although I'd bet good money Dumbledore suspected something. Of course, it still doesn't give me any clue about how Peverell made it. Right now I'm thinking some kind of obscure alchemical process like spinning moonlight into thread or something."
"Wow," said Harry. "Wait, so if the cloak is real, then the other two Hollows—"
"Most likely, yes," Hermione continued. "According to Luna, there are historically supported tales of a uniquely powerful wand that was passed down the centuries from dark wizard to dark wizard by murder and trickery. I found something of them myself in the Hogwarts library, but the thread was lost in the 1700s. As for the Stone of Resurrection—"
She looked around and pulled Harry to the side of the room, lowering her voice so no one could hear them, besides Ginny, of course.
"Not much is known about it, but I checked with the Siderium just to be sure, and I remembered something. Do you remember the ring Horcrux in the shack?"
"Yeah, what about it?"
"When Dumbledore died, he told us in his messages that the stone in the ring was a powerful and dangerous artifact. There's a symbol for the Deathly Hallows. It's not used much anymore because Grindelwald used it for his own mark." She sketched it out on a napkin, a circle inside a triangle, bisected by a line. "I got a good look at that ring when I cut Dumbledore's finger off. Enough for the Siderium to call it up. It had that symbol on it, Harry. And what's more, in the memories Dumbledore showed us in 5th year, Voldemort's grandfather said it had the Peverell coat of arms on it."
"Merlin's beard. You think that's the Resurrection Stone?"
"If such a thing exists, maybe. Do you have any idea where it might be?"
"Don't know. Probably put away with the rest of Dumbledore's stuff. A lot of it just went into storage after the war. Hang on." He stopped, expressions flitting across his face, as happened when he was in intense conversation with Ginny. After a minute he frowned. "Yeah, you're probably right. Okay, listen, Hermione. We think if there really is any truth to the story, it sounds like the stone is bad news. This is me and Ginny saying that. We don't know if we want to start down that path. It might be better to let sleeping Krups lie. At least, unless we ever get a lead on the wand." Hermione considered that, remembering the story. She'd read it to her own children, too. She'd always thought the stone was the most dangerous of the Hollows in Beetle's tale, the most corrupting, the most self-destructive. The cloak was naturally the wisest choice, and there were those who could wield power responsibly, but what could the stone do in the long run but slowly consume and destroy?
"No, you're right," she said. "That's probably for the best."